Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You step through the gates of an asylum that hasn't seen the outside world in decades. The air is heavy, almost viscous, pressing against your chest. The once bright hallways are now dim, with peeling paint and shadows curling across cracked floors. A faint echo of footsteps drifts from somewhere deep inside, though no one else is here. You try to rationalize it. The settling of an old building, the wind through broken windows. But your gut tells you otherwise. Something is alive in here. You begin to walk down a corridor, and the silence feels deliberate, almost watchful. Rooms on either side hold remnants of the past. Rusted bed frames, metal trays still scattered with instruments, faded charts pinned to walls like forgotten memories. Somewhere a door creaks open, and for a moment you feel a presence. Not human, not quite, but aware. The asylum remembers. In this series we will explore the world's most haunted asylums, places where patients never truly left, where the past refuses to stay buried, and where the echoes of human suffering seem to linger in every brick, every shadow, every hallway. These buildings were meant to heal. Instead, they became cages, prisons of despair, laboratories of cruelty, and ultimately, vessels for the memories of those who endured what no one should have. Tonight, we step inside those halls. We will walk where few dare. We will hear whispers, footsteps, and cries that time itself cannot erase. And by the end, you may never look at an asylum the same way again. Featured asylums in this video: Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, West Virginia, USA, Danvers State Hospital, Massachusetts, USA, St. George's Hospital, UK, Belitz Heilstätten, Germany, Letchworth Village, New York, USA. But first, imagine the first patients who arrived. They were led through towering gates, through doors that would never fully open to them again. Families said goodbye, believing in care, only to leave their loved ones to the hands of a system that prioritized control over compassion. For those inside, it was a new world. A world where days stretched endlessly, where silence could be deafening, and where fear became a constant companion. The air in these buildings holds weight. You can feel it as soon as you cross the threshold. Some say the walls themselves remember, that every scream, every tear, every desperate plea has seeped into the foundation, so that even decades later, anyone who enters cannot escape the residue of those lives. Step carefully. Every step carries history. Every corridor is a story waiting to be told. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, West Virginia, USA. Rising atop a hill like a fortress, it was built in the mid-1800s to care for the mentally ill. Its walls, once painted white to reflect hope and purity, now sag under decades of neglect, cracked and stained with age. Step through its doors today, and the smell of mold and rust hits first, followed by a silence so complete it presses against your eardrums. But if you listen closely, you might hear something else. The faintest echo of a cry, a footstep, a whisper from the past. When it opened, it was a marvel of its time. Modern architecture, wide corridors, ample windows designed to let in light and fresh air. A place built for healing. But as more patients arrived, the promise of care eroded. Crowding became immediate, rooms designed for one or two filled with dozens. The staff, overwhelmed, struggled to maintain order. Desperation grew. The laughter of children and the sobs of adults mingled with the metallic clang of doors and the sharp whistle of the nurse's call. It was the sound of lives trapped, lives erased, lives turned into numbers on a ledger. Patients had names, but in practice, they were reduced to records. Numbers assigned to beds, files documenting treatments both mundane and cruel. Hydrotherapy baths where the water was ice cold. Electroshock therapy administered without full understanding. Even lobotomies that left the body alive, but the mind broken. And yet within the chaos, the asylum continued to operate. Each corridor absorbing the despair, each room a vessel for anguish that refused to fade. Visitors today report sudden chills, the feeling of being watched, footsteps following their own, and whispers echoing when no one else is present. One story stands out. A patient, admitted as a young woman, vanished into the wings of the asylum. She was never seen again, her file simply marked transferred, though no records exist of where. Some claim her spirit wanders the hallways still, appearing at the end of corridors only to vanish when approached. Staff and explorers alike speak of sudden shadows, of objects moving without explanation, of an oppressive weight pressing against the chest as if the building itself remembers and resents your presence. Trans-Allegheny was not unique in its suffering. Across the world, asylums shared the same story, built with the intent to cure, yet filled with despair. And yet, for all its horror, it continues to draw visitors. Urban explorers, paranormal investigators, and thrill-seekers enter its halls with cameras, flashlights, and sometimes trembling hearts. They come seeking proof, seeking the inexplicable. What they find is often more than they expected. Rooms frozen in time, echoes of a life that no longer exists, and a presence that watches and waits. For those who step inside, leaving is never easy. The asylum has a way of pulling the mind inward, making the fear, the sorrow, the history, all intimately personal. And it is here, in the sprawling wings of Trans-Allegheny, that you begin to understand the true nature of haunted asylums. Not all hauntings are violent. Many are residual, traces of trauma that replay endlessly, footsteps that echo after the visitor has left, whispers that drift down empty corridors, shadows that stretch and bend in impossible ways. These are the ghosts of experience, of suffering, of lives caught between a system built for care and the cruelty of neglect. And as you walk these halls in your mind, you may begin to sense it. The asylum never truly forgets. It remembers everything, and it waits for the next soul to step inside. Danvers State Hospital, Massachusetts, USA. The first glimpse of its Gothic spires rising against a gray sky is enough to send a chill down the spine. Built in 1878, it was intended as a sanctuary for the mentally ill, a place of care, progress, and healing. But as the decades passed, the ideal of care was swallowed by overcrowding, underfunding, and the relentless march of despair. Today, the red brick buildings stand like tombstones, windows shattered, corridors darkened, and doors rusted shut. Yet step inside, and it is not emptiness that greets you, but memory, thick and suffocating. The halls were designed to control. Long corridors, locked doors, observation rooms where staff could monitor every movement. Patients were stripped of autonomy, reduced to schedules and numbers. Treatments ranged from compassionate to horrifyingly experimental. Hydrotherapy, insulin shock, restraints, and isolation. The air itself was thick with fear, despair, and the silent suffering of those who could not escape. Visitors report the weight of the building pressing down, footsteps echoing their own, whispers curling through empty rooms as though the walls themselves remember the agony. One wing, the West Ward, holds a story that still echoes. Patients confined for minor disorders were often left in isolation for days. Some disappeared without explanation. Others were subjected to treatments that left them barely recognizable. Explorers speak of cold drafts that seem alive, of shadowy figures moving just out of view, of objects that shift when no one is watching. Cameras sometimes capture movements that defy logic. A rocking chair tipping over, a medical chart sliding across a table, a faint silhouette vanishing into the darkness. Danvers architecture amplifies its horror. The ceilings are high, designed to prevent disease, but now they make every sound resonate with an unnatural clarity. The floors creak under the lightest step, and every door is a promise of a story you are not meant to witness. And the stories are relentless. Voices whispering names, cries echoing in stairwells, shadows appearing at the end of hallways. Visitors often report a sensation of being watched from every direction, as if unseen eyes follow your every movement, and a presence, intelligent and aware, tests your courage at every turn. But it is not just fear that binds you to Danvers. There is an almost magnetic pull, a morbid curiosity that grips the mind. You begin to see the asylum as a living entity. It does not merely exist. It observes, remembers, and responds. Residual hauntings mingle with active presences. The repetition of trauma replayed over decades, the echoes of sorrow and panic that refuse to fade. Some say the spirits here are trapped. Others believe the building itself became a vessel for memory and emotion. Whatever the cause, Danvers State Hospital leaves an imprint. It is not merely a location. It is an experience that embeds itself into the mind of anyone who enters, lingering long after they leave. Walking through the corridors, one cannot help but reflect on the duality of humanity, the desire to heal and the capacity to harm. Danvers State Hospital embodies both. Each brick, each cracked window, each echoing cry is a testament to lives lived, controlled, and often broken. And as you picture yourself moving through its halls, the ghosts are not just shadows. They are warnings, reminders of what happens when care turns into confinement, compassion into control, and hope into despair. Danvers waits silently, watching, remembering, daring you to see the story in full. Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, New Jersey, USA. From the outside, the sprawling complex seems frozen in time, a labyrinth of brick wings and towering smokestacks reaching skyward like silent sentinels. Opened in 1848, Trenton was meant to be a model of psychiatric care, a sanctuary for the misunderstood and suffering. Yet the ideal never lasted. Overcrowding, understaffing, and the harsh realities of early psychiatric medicine transformed hope into horror. Patients were confined for months, years, decades, their names fading from memory as the hospital grew, a self-contained city of despair. Walk its halls today, and you are immediately aware that Trenton is far from empty. The corridors are thick with the echoes of the past, faint whispers, creaking floorboards, the distant slam of doors that should not move. Some visitors describe sudden drops in temperature, the sensation of fingers brushing their arms, shadows that linger at the edge of sight. These are not fleeting moments. They are persistent, deliberate, a constant reminder that this hospital never truly abandoned its inhabitants. Each wing holds its own history of suffering and survival, its own layer of memory that presses against the present. One wing, the male chronic ward, is infamous. Here, patients with severe conditions were left in isolation, restrained, or subjected to treatments considered barbaric today. Insulin shock, electroconvulsive therapy, prolonged seclusion. Explorers report the same phenomena repeatedly. Lights flicker without explanation, objects move subtly, and the feeling of being watched never dissipates. Cameras capture inexplicable shadows, and audio equipment records low, mournful voices that vanish upon inspection. The building itself seems to breathe, its walls expanding and contracting with the weight of decades of sorrow and fear. Beyond Trenton, smaller haunted asylums across the United States echo similar tales. Willowbrook State School in New York, for example, became infamous for overcrowding and mistreatment of children with disabilities. Patients were often left to wander aimlessly, their cries swallowed by the cavernous halls. Some rooms remain intact, chairs overturned, medical tools scattered, the atmosphere dense with residual trauma. Visitors describe being pulled toward certain rooms, drawn by an invisible hand, sensing presences that are neither ghosts nor memories alone, but a combination of both. At some institutions, such as the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, the sheer scale amplifies the horror. Long, winding corridors twist unpredictably. Stairwells descend into darkness. Hidden rooms and tunnels create a maze where it is easy to feel trapped. Explorers speak of footsteps mirroring their own, whispers in abandoned wards, and fleeting glimpses of figures in patient gowns. And in these spaces, time behaves strangely. Moments stretch, sounds distort, and the mind begins to fill in gaps with fear. The asylums do not merely host ghosts, they host the imprints of suffering, trauma, and unrelenting memory. The common thread across these haunted asylums is not just abandonment, but the persistence of human emotion. Despair, fear, isolation, hope, all crystallized into the walls, floors, and ceilings. Walk into any of these spaces and you feel it instantly. The weight of lives lived under strict control, the echoes of voices long silenced, the invisible eyes that seem to follow every step. These places are not simply empty. They are alive with memory, and they demand attention. They do not allow visitors to leave unchanged. The stories they tell linger, whispering in your mind, pressing against your chest, leaving you aware that once you have walked through these halls, part of the asylum walks with you forever. And so, the haunted asylums of the world remain a testament to the thin line between care and cruelty, between compassion and confinement, between life and something darker. They are not merely locations, they are experiences, living monuments to the human psyche at its most vulnerable. Once you have entered, the stories, the echoes, and the shadows follow, reminding you that the past is never truly gone, and that some ghosts never rest. As the sun dips below the horizon and the last golden light stretches across the crumbling facades of these haunted asylums, a different kind of darkness settles inside, one that cannot be chased away by time or memory. The stories of Trenton, Trans-Allegheny, Willowbrook, and countless other institutions converge, not as isolated incidents, but as a chorus of suffering that refuses to fade. Every abandoned wing, every locked room, every rusted piece of medical equipment holds echoes of lives suspended between care and neglect, between life and death. And though decades may pass, the memories remain, stitched into the very architecture, waiting patiently for anyone brave or foolish enough to enter. Step into the main hall of Trans-Allegheny, and you feel it immediately. The air is thick, heavy with expectation, almost sentient in its awareness. The long corridors stretch endlessly, doors creaking under their own weight, peeling paint resembling long-forgotten scars. Some visitors report whispers that seem to come from every corner at once. Others feel sudden chills, the sensation of being guided toward rooms that hold the darkest secrets of the asylum. These experiences are not anomalies. Every explorer who returns recounts similar incidents, confirming the building's awareness, its persistence, its refusal to remain silent. The walls themselves seem to breathe, inhaling the presence of those who dare to enter, exhaling faint murmurs and sighs that the mind struggles to interpret. In the wings where the most severe cases were held, the very walls pulse with memory. Insulin shock rooms, padded cells, and seclusion wards are silent, yet they speak. Shadows appear at the corner of the eye, fleeting shapes that vanish when confronted, leaving only the unsettling impression that something is observing you. Footsteps echo along empty hallways, following, yet never matching the rhythm of the visitors walking them. And then come the voices. Low, almost imperceptible at first, gradually growing in intensity until they pierce your attention. Sometimes they call names. Sometimes they repeat fragments of conversations from decades past, leaving you to question whether what you hear is history or something else entirely. At Willowbrook, the story is even more visceral. Rooms that once housed children are frozen in time, tiny chairs tipped over, toys abandoned, walls scribbled with messages from young hands. Paranormal investigators describe sudden drops in temperature, cold spots that linger in corners, and the eerie sensation of unseen eyes watching. Some claim to hear laughter that turns into crying in the span of a heartbeat. The building, like all the others, is more than brick and mortar. It is a vessel for memory, emotion, and trauma. Every creaking floorboard, every echo, every faint breath of wind seems charged with intention, reminding anyone who enters that these walls hold more than decay. They hold the weight of lives once lived and lost within them. Trenton's male chronic ward, now silent and decayed, holds the same relentless presence. Explorers recount invisible fingers grazing their arms, sudden cold drafts carrying whispers, and shadows that stretch unnaturally, following their every move. Cameras capture anomalies, lights flicker inexplicably, figures appear only to vanish moments later, and audio devices record low moans or fragmented voices. The pattern is unmistakable. These are not random occurrences. The asylums act as living records, replaying decades of suffering and control, forcing the present to acknowledge the past. To walk through one is not merely to observe, it is to participate, to be implicated in the continuum of memory and despair, to feel the lingering impact of choices made long before your arrival. In the oldest wings, the echoes are sharper. The padded cells smell faintly of damp fabric, disinfectant, and rusted metal. The seclusion rooms, once places of quiet punishment, hold an almost tangible tension in the air. Visitors report the sensation of being watched even when the halls are empty, as if the asylum itself recognizes the intrusion. Footsteps resound from distant hallways, disjointed from reality, always approaching yet never revealing their source. At times, faint cries of protest or panic emerge, ephemeral and fleeting, vanishing as quickly as they arrive. The asylums do not sleep. Their memories do not fade. They wait, patient, for the next witness. And yet, amidst the terror, there is fascination. We are drawn to these places because they confront us with what we fear most: our fragility, our mortality, and our capacity for both cruelty and empathy. The abandoned asylum is a mirror, reflecting not only the horrors inflicted upon its residents, but the universal vulnerability of the human condition. The walls do not discriminate. They remember all: the innocent and the guilty, the overlooked and the prominent, the children and the adults, the living and the departed. Walking these halls, one cannot avoid the weight of history pressing down, the accumulation of decades of suffering and neglect that makes the air itself seem thick and unyielding. As night fully descends, the asylum's final secret becomes clear. These are not spaces meant to be forgotten. They are enduring stages where history, trauma, and memory intertwine. Once entered, they change you. The shadows, whispers, and lingering presences follow long after you leave, etching themselves into your consciousness. To leave an abandoned asylum is to carry a fragment of its story with you. The echoes, the despair, the lives that once breathed within its walls. The haunted asylum is not just a location. It is an experience, one that ensures that the stories, the echoes, and the memories never truly end. Every corridor, every abandoned room, every silent ward holds more than history. They hold fragments of lives, of fear, of despair, and sometimes hope, locked forever within the walls. Step inside, and you awaken them. Leave, and they leave a part of themselves with you. The asylums never truly close. They do not forgive. They do not forget. The most harrowing aspect is the inescapable presence of unfinished stories. In rooms where treatments were cruel and oversight was absent, visitors describe sudden disorientation, the sense of being unseen, forces guiding them, of histories pressing inward, demanding recognition. Patients who were silenced, restrained, or forgotten continue to whisper their existence into the present. Every sound, the creak of a door, the faint scraping of a chair, the distant hollow moan, becomes a thread connecting past to present. It is impossible not to feel complicit simply by walking through these corridors, by acknowledging the layers of memory embedded into the very bricks. Even outside, the grounds resist the passage of time. Rusted gates, overgrown pathways, and fractured windows serve as silent witnesses to decades of pain. Nature creeps back, reclaiming the structures, yet it cannot erase what has been imprinted on the atmosphere. Every vine crawling along a brick facade, every bird nesting in a shattered window, every gust of wind passing through a broken roof carries fragments of history, echoes of trauma and the residual energy of those who endured the asylum's walls. Ultimately, the allure of these haunted asylums lies not just in their stories of suffering, but in the way they awaken our own fears. Fear of fragility, fear of confinement, fear of the body, the mind, the self slipping beyond control, fear of death. These fears, embedded alongside the memories of those who came before, create a space that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. To witness it is to confront a shadow of humanity's deepest contradictions: hope and despair, care and cruelty, life and the inevitability of mortality. The haunted asylum, in its final revelation, offers no easy resolution. It presents a world where memories persist, where the echoes of pain and resilience collide, and where every visitor becomes part of the ongoing narrative. To step inside is to acknowledge that these spaces never truly end, that history, trauma, and memory are inseparable. They are living monuments, silent yet potent, offering a mirror into our own fears, while ensuring that the past refuses to remain forgotten. Step carefully, observe closely, and remember, these are not just ruins. These are stages where the echoes of humanity's most intimate fears play out, where walls remember, and where the past refuses to release its grip. Once you have entered, you carry them with you, They linger in your mind, in your senses, in the spaces you thought were safe. The haunted asylum does not merely exist, it persists.